Hey guys! So last night I went through my palette collection and I picked out the 5 palettes I think I would keep if I could only keep 5. So if I were really paring down my collection to just the basics, this would give me all the variety that I want and all of the formulas and textures that I like, but in a very, very minimal collection. So I'm really excited to share my picks with you. I've done this video a couple of times in the past. I think the last time I did it was about a year ago, and my answers have completely changed. Over the past year, I've had the chance to try a lot of new palettes, a lot of new brands and formulas that I hadn't tried before, so I feel like I have a really good mix here. And as I was going through and choosing these palettes, I wasn't necessarily picking my top 5 favorite palettes, even though I would say that all 5 of these are some of my favorites. These aren't necessarily my top 5 favorites or even my top 5 most used palettes in my collection, but I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of everything. I wanted to make sure I had, a good selection of neutrals, but also plenty of colors and plenty of different textures of shadows, because I do like to play around with different types of formulas, so I feel like I have a little bit of everything here, and I'm really happy with this little selection. So let's go ahead and get right into it. So the first palette I can't imagine not keeping would be my Lethal Cosmetics Custom 12 pan. I put this together last fall, and I really designed it to be like an all year round palette that just has a little bit of everything that I like to have in a palette. I wanted to make sure I had a little bit of something for every season so that I wouldn't just designate this as a fall palette or a spring palette. So, I have some fun pops of color in there. I have some really pretty shifty shades. I've got these 2 multi-chromes here. And then, of course, some neutrals as well. I'm actually wearing this today. I have all 4 of these top shades on. I have this Periwinkle, that's the shade Altitude, in my crease, and then I layered these 2 multi-chromes together. I recently found that I love the way these 2 look together. So these are the shades Parsec and Genesis. And then I have this mint green, which is called Celestial, in my inner corner. The only other shade I have on is the Periwinkle from the ABH Norvina palette. That's what I have, just deepening up my outer corner, but for the most part I'm just wearing those 4 shades, and I love those 4. But if I want to do one of my classic neutral mauve looks, I've got, these 4 shades down here. Those make a really pretty quad. I'll list all of the shade names that are in here down below if you're curious. So just a little bit of everything in there. I feel like this is one of my most versatile palettes, so I think it would be a really good palette to keep in my minimalist collection. Another type of palette that I always like to have on hand is a neutral palette with a lot of like muted rosy mauve-y tones. And I've recently really gotten into the Sigma New Mod palette, so I decided to go with this one. I did a 1 week 1 palette on this at the beginning of March, if you want to see that, but when I did that video, I realized just how versatile this palette really is. When you first look at it, you think, oh, it's kind of, you're gonna get a mauve look every time you use it, but really there's a lot more you can do with this than just mauve berry shades. You do have, quite a few berry tones over here, but this whole section right here, these first 6 shades, are very taupey, really not super pink. I mean, they have a little bit of a rosy undertone, which I like, but they're a lot more neutral. Then over here, you can go really purpley with this if you want to, with like edgy and voguish. There's a duochrome here, avant-garde. There's also a gold and a brown. So even if I wanted to do just a very classic brown neutral smoky eye, I could do that with this as well. Also, lots of great one and done eyeshadow options in here, both the mattes and the shimmers. I love putting Sophisticated, this matte taupe, all over my lid. Also, this shimmery taupe right here makes a gorgeous one shadow look. I've also done that with this pink. Just a lot of different color directions you can go with this. I really think of this as like a new revamped version of the Anastasia Modern Renaissance palette. I'm not sure if that's what Sigma was going for, but I kind of feel like it was because they named it New Mod. Also, the packaging is very similar with this velvet, like light blush color. I used to have Modern Renaissance, loved it, but to me this just it's a similar type of vibe, but I feel like it just suits my current preferences a little bit better. I like that it has just more like variety within that berry family. And then I also like that it's a bit more cool toned than Modern Renaissance, a lot more cool toned actually. So really been enjoying this palette so far this year. Sigma doesn't have my all-time favorite formula, but I do find the formula in here to be very workable. The only shades I do have some trouble with are like the deeper mattes. But as I always say with Sigma's mattes, I find it's best to just make sure that I set my eyeshadow primer before I go in with the mattes, and they blend really well that way. So I don't always do that with every formula formula, but I do feel like with Sigma, that is the best way to use them. So really been enjoying that palette, and I would love to have that in my mini palette collection. Now, another palette I had to include would of course be my Flower Beauty Desert Lights palette. I love this one because it's all shimmers, they're all these beautiful creamy foiled shadows, and this would just be a great palette to pair with any of the other palettes that I've chosen. Anytime I just want to put a pop of like a really foiled, beautiful metallic shade on my lid. This just has so many of my favorite shades in it. I also like to wear this palette just by itself as well, but this is a specific texture of eyeshadow that I would want to make sure I would have in my collection, no matter how small it is, because I just love being able to pick one of these shades up on my finger, slap it on my lid, and look like I put so much more effort than I actually did into my look. And I just know that this is a formula I would not want to be without. I just love a nice thick shimmer shadow. These shadows are just so unique, so just special. Some of my favorites in my whole collection, so would have to have this in my 5 palette collection. Next, I wanted to make sure I chose a good little mini quad that would be good for travel or just a quick look where I don't have to put much thought into it. So I went with probably my favorite quad in my collection. This is the Aether Beauty Citrine quad. So we have some really fun metallic, like rosy neutrals. We also have that, you know, cool slash rosy toned neutral palette from Sigma. But I wanted to make sure I had just a small selection of warm neutrals to work with, and this is just about everything I feel like I would need. I just really like these shadows. The shimmers especially have like such a smooth, almost glassy look on the eyes. I like that there's just one matte, so, you know, as soon as I open up this quad, I know, like, I start with that shade, usually, unless I'm just going to do a one and done look with like one of the shimmers, but normally I'll just slap that through my crease, and then I'll choose 1 or 2 or 3, any combination of those shimmers that I want to use, and the look always turns out beautifully. It's also warm toned without being too orangey copper. Even this bronzy shade here, I really like. I'm a little bit picky with my bronzes and my coppers. Some of them I find make me look a little bit sickly, or they like bring out like too much red in my eyes or something, but this one doesn't have that effect on me. And I also sometimes like to put these two shades next to each other. Like I'll put this shade, this more taupey shade in the center of my lid, and then the bronze more in the inner part of my lid, and then I'll put the lightest shade in my inner corner. And that is just the perfect gradient where it's not too much warmth. I like that it has that taupe in there to, you know, cool things down a little bit if I want to, but it's just the perfect quad. All 4 of the shades work beautifully. Actually, right now, this is on sale for $10 on Aether Beauty's website, so just saying. I would definitely recommend waiting for a sale. They have sales on their site all the time. Especially lately, it seems like they're always having some kind of sale, so definitely recommend waiting, and you could probably get this at a drugstore price, but it is amazing. Definitely my favorite quad. I just love it so much. So for the 5th palette, this was the one I was having the hardest time narrowing down. I was going back and forth between a few different palettes in my collection, and I wanted to make sure it was one that had some more fun pops of color, because I'm definitely all set with the neutrals between these 3, the Sigma, the Flower, and the Aether. Those pretty much have me covered as far as neutrals go. And of course the Lethal palette has quite a few pops of color, but I wanted just a few more colorful options, and I also wanted a few more like shifty duochrome shades. So I ended up going with one that's actually a pretty recent addition to my collection. This is the Odin's Eye Sea Talk palette. This is the palette that they did in collaboration with Lauren May Beauty, and I have been loving this palette. I like that it has a few more blue shades in it. I do really like to play with blue eyeshadow. I don't wear it all the time. I definitely go through phases where I wear it more than others, but it is one of my favorite colors of eyeshadow to play around with. So I like that it has 2 blue like duochrome shimmers and then a nice navy blue. I found that I really like having a navy blue, just a nice deep matte navy blue to work with, so that would be there. It also has a beautiful mint green, a like electric yellow shade, this really fun pink and blue duochrome, and then it does have 4 more neutral shades here in this first little quad, but this taupe right here is actually another reason why I chose this palette, because this is probably my favorite taupe shimmer I have ever encountered. It is so sparkly and dimensional. I mean, honestly, I would keep this palette just for this shade. It is so beautiful. I like that it has a more like almost purpley taupe base. And then the shimmer is just next level. It is so sparkly. It's got kind of like a silvery shift. Just like one of the most gorgeous taupe shades I've ever seen. So this just has a lot of unique shades in it that aren't in those other four palettes that I think would just add a lot to this collection. So those would be the 5 palettes I'd keep if I had to get rid of all my palettes except for 5. I think I would have everything I need right here. Lots of great colorful options, neutral options, and a good variety of different types of textures and finishes of shadows. So I think I'd be very happy with these. I think this would be a great little versatile palette collection. Even though this is a very small palette collection, I feel like I could probably get just about any look I would want out of these 5. Let me know down in the comments if you could only keep 5 eyeshadow palettes, what would they be? I would love to know. I feel like this is such an interesting hypothetical, but this was a lot of fun. Thank you all so much for hanging out today. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you haven't already. I would love to see you again soon. I do also have a Patreon and a channel membership if you would like to support my channel. Otherwise, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you again very soon in my next video. Bye!